Okay, we are moving on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Emily Kawano, who will be giving a talk on international solidarity economy. Emily Kawano is the coordinator of the United States Solidarity Economy Network, as well as the co-director of the Wellspring Cooperative Corporation. Through her work with Wellspring, she is striving to create an engine for new community-based job creation that will provide job training and entry-level jobs to unemployed and underemployed residents through worker-owned cooperatives. An economist by training, she's taught economics at Smith College and served as the director of the Center for Popular Economics from 2004 to 2013. So Emily, when you hop on and are ready, you may begin your talk.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Um, yeah, I'm going to sort of do the basics about solidarity economy and system change. And I do have some slides, so I'm going to do a screen share. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. All right. So just thank you everybody for being with us. And I wanted just to do a little grounding, if you would. So, there's a typo there. So just one breath to ground us in our bodies. One breath to open your mind to all the rich ideas I'm sure that you've been hearing about all day today, and hopefully to new ideas you'll hear now. And one breath to open your heart to different ideas, but also to all the diversity of people and what they're bringing, people and other living beings. Okay, so a little quick agenda review. We'll be talking about what system change are we talking about when we talk about system change. We'll be talking a little bit about capitalism and post-capitalism, defining capitalism and why does it matter. And then, so then we'll talk about solidarity economy. We'll define solidarity economy and look at some examples. So we are in this historic moment, maybe once in a generation, maybe
Please bear with us. We're having some technical difficulties, but we will try to get that fixed as soon as possible so Emily can continue her talk. All right, Emily, you are back on. Are you able
Yeah,
to share your screen again?
I can. You can hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you
Okay.
and see you
The
perfectly.
problem is when I'm doing the slide deck, I can't see, like I probably had dropped off the call before I realized it. So you could just tell me if we lose connection again. All right.
Okay.
Let me try to share the screen again. All right. Oops. All right. So I'm not sure where I lost you all, but the point of this is to say that there's multiple convergent crises, and that is creating an opportunity for change, really deep change, for a real fundamental paradigm shift. So that's what system change is all about. So before we actually can talk about system change, I think we do need to be clear about it, of the system that we live under. The dominant system is capitalism. And I want to do this quick interactive exercise with you all. So if you can, in your computer or your phone, type in menti.com and then this code 58634726. I'm going to go to the presentation screen, which has that information. Hopefully this works. So menti.com, at C at the top, that's the URL, menti.com. And then when you get there, type in this number, 58634726. Hopefully this works. The question is, what does capitalism mean to you? What does capitalism mean to you? Is this working? Can somebody type in a word and then hit enter? And if I don't see any words showing up, oh, good. So keep them coming. Anybody can do this. You can enter as many words as you like. So far, we just have competition. We're only going to take like a minute. So get your word in there, or words, as many words as you like. Exploitation. Capitalism. What does it mean to you? Commodification. Other words. What does capitalism mean to you? Just keep coming. You can keep entering. One person can enter, I think, as many as you like. Unlimited accumulation. What else? What does it mean to you? Profit, self-interest, competition, alienation. Just a few more seconds, so get those words in there. Profit. Anything else? Anybody want to add? A few more seconds. Okay. False sense of scarcity, commodification, profit, a worn social pattern for, I'm not sure, disparities, madness, alienation, spirituality inside out. Okay, great. I mean, you can keep them coming. Externalized costs, hoarding. You can keep them coming, and don't worry, we're going to come back to another word cloud. So now that you've had some practice, yeah, class struggle. Interesting. So this, so I'm going to stop. So you can keep going. I mean, I'll come back to this word cloud myself just to look at it. But I'm going to stop this screen share and go back to the slides. Keep those words in mind. And a lot of those terms really are an expression of how people experience capitalism. So a powerful word cloud. I do want to offer folks a definition of capitalism in my work. I've spent decades doing popular economics, helping people understand how the economy works or how it doesn't work. And we often hear, oh, capitalism, it's just too complicated. It's just too hard to define. And then it becomes this catch-all, at least among progressives. It becomes a catch-all for everything that we don't like, and it's really kind of mushy. So I want to give you this definition. This is a definition that the Center for Popular Economics, that I've been a member of for probably 30 years, and used to be the executive director of. We are a collective of progressive and radical economists that do this work of demystifying the economy. This is the definition that we've been using for more than 40 years, and it has stood the test of time pretty well. So first, it's about the private ownership of what we sometimes call the MOPs, the means of production. It just means it's the stuff that you need to produce something. It's your land, it's your factories, it's your building, it's your equipment, it's your inputs, okay? So private ownership of the means of production, that right there, that's your capitalists, right? They own the means of production. Wage labor, right? These are workers. They do not own the means of production, okay? They do not own, and therefore they do not control the means of production. Right there, you have the capitalist, and you have the worker, and you have class struggle. Even though there are some nice capitalists, there's still this, like in the system, there is inherent intrinsic struggle between the worker.
Emily, you are paused.
Okay.
All right, I can hear you again.
Not sure the last thing you heard from me, but
You only paused a moment ago, so
okay.
you can maybe restart your
Okay.
sentence. Yes.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So the fourth bullet point is commodity production, which means that you're producing things for sale, not necessarily for use, right? And there's a big tendency to produce for what is most profitable, not for what is most socially useful. And the last is market exchange, right? Things are bought and sold through the medium of markets and prices. Okay, so that you need all 5 of these characteristics in order to have capitalism. So in my work, my day job is I'm working on developing worker-owned businesses, worker cooperatives. And I have heard people say, I work in a capitalist business because we engage in commodity production. We produce stuff for sale and we sell it on the market. And I say, no, a worker cooperative is not a capitalist enterprise, because what you do not have is you do not have that division between the capitalist and the worker, right? The workers are the owners. So it's a different mode of production. All right, why does it matter? Why does it matter to know what is capitalism and what is post-capitalism? A lack of clarity about what capitalism is can easily lead to just reforming and thereby strengthening capitalism. So a good example of that is the New Deal, right? The New Deal was really stolen from the platform, the planks of socialist and communist movements, but it was co-opted by the powers that be, and really were implemented at a time when there was a lot of social unrest, and people were pushing for overthrowing capitalism. And by making capitalism kinder and gentler, it saved capitalism. And they were pretty clear. The powers that be were pretty clear about that. Clarity about what our long-term vision is, whether it's reforming capitalism or it's looking towards post-capitalism, is important. It helps to ensure that for solidarity economy that we're building transformative reforms, sometimes called non-reformist reforms, and that we're not reinforcing capitalism. A current example is the Green New Deal. right? In the United States anyway, right? A lot of it does not challenge some of the basic assumptions about who owns and controls um, energy, who is, when you're creating these green jobs, who's owning and controlling those businesses. Um, so there's a struggle over the Green New Deal that would be informed by whether you think we're reforming capitalism or whether we're shooting for post-capitalism. So this table breaks down these two major strands, right? Capitalism and post-capitalism. And just to say that capitalism has different models, right? Neoliberalism is sort of the cutthroat, bare-knuckled, supposedly laissez-faire model that we're seeing now, that dominates now. Before that, as I mentioned, there was New Deal capitalism, which is like a paler, much weaker version of social democracy. Social democracy, maybe think Scandinavia, generous welfare state, social welfare state, much more regulation of corporations, much more of a role for government, um, stabilization and policies. So the New Deal in the US anyway was like a pale version of that. All of these, I would argue, are nonetheless capitalist, even though they're quite different. And certainly I would prefer social democracy any day to even New Deal, or definitely would prefer to neoliberalism. I would still say that that is capitalist because it is still dominated by capitalist corporations. So just we'll talk more about post-capitalist visions. We'll talk about solidarity economy more. While we're here with this slide, I just want to point out that solidarity economy would clearly, very clearly reject authoritarian post-capitalist systems like authoritarian state socialism. So clearly we would reject that, since democracy is pretty central in our values. Right, so just quickly, three different models of capitalism. Neoliberalism is this supposedly laissez-faire markets good, state bad, try to shrink down the state. New Deal capitalism, came out of the Great Depression, and social democracy, as I mentioned, think Scandinavia. Yeah, just a little comparison of capitalism versus solidarity economy. So instead of private ownership of the means of production, we're talking about collective ownership. Instead of wage labor, we're saying, okay, the owners, the workers are the owners, and therefore it gets rid of this class conflict, class struggle. So under capitalism, where it's profit maximization for stockholders, in solidarity economy, we're talking about welfare maximization for all the stakeholders, including Mother Earth. Instead of commodity production, yeah, some stuff is made for sale, certainly, but also more importantly, things are made for use. Things are produced that are socially useful. And some of it is not produced for sale. It's produced for direct use or for gifting or exchange, not through the market. And instead of market exchange, there might be some markets, but there could be many other forms of exchange as well. Okay, I want to do another quick little interactive thing. If you would, close your eyes. We're going to do a little guided visualization. Close your eyes and imagine that your vision for a more just and sustainable world has come to pass. Breathe in deeply. What do you smell? What do you hear? Imagine that you're walking. What are you walking on? What do you see as you are walking along? Do you see cars? Do you see bicycles? Do you see buildings? What kind of buildings? Do you see parks? What do they look like? Who is using them? Do you see people? Who are they? Do you know them? And now you arrive at your destination. What have you come here to do? Work, visit, volunteer, shop? Okay, open your eyes and think a little bit, feel that other world, and think about what values underpin that vision. Okay, and we're going to go back to the Mentimeter. Think about the values that underpin your vision. Oh, hold on a second. I think I can do this. And so it's the same code. If you're still in Mentimeter, you can just start entering your values. What values anchor your vision? So again, if you're not there already, go to menti, menti.com, and use the code 58634726. I'm just going to take a minute to get this word cloud. Any inputs? Anybody want to put in what values anchored your vision? I'm wondering if maybe for some reason it's not working.
Yeah, I tried to hop on and it's still just showing me your first question. I'm not sure if everyone's experiencing that though.
Let me try again. Okay, it's okay. We'll just skip this. Just keep in mind your values, okay? So I've done this exercise many times, and every single time it aligns, the values that people come up with in a word cloud align pretty well. They'll map pretty well into these. These are the 5. So solidarity economy is grounded in values. And it will look slightly different in different parts of the world. In the United States, our network uses these 5. So solidarity, democracy, so participatory democracy, not only in politics, but also at the workplace and in your communities. We talk about equity in all dimensions, so race, class, gender, ability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sustainability, pretty clear, and pluralism. That's important because it's not a one-size-fits-all model. It is not a blueprint, right? There are many paths to this more just and sustainable and democratic world. Many paths. As the Zapatistas say, it's a world we imagine, a world in which many worlds fit. So solidarity economy is grounded in values, and this is a fuller definition. So this is drawn both from the US Solidarity Economy Network and RAPES. So RAPES is the international network connecting solidarity economy. So it's a network with a presence on all of the continents except for Antarctica. So RAPES went through a 2-year international consultation process to get us on the same page so we have a basic foundation of common understanding of what is solidarity economy. So it is a framework. It's sort of a model. It's kind of a theory. I prefer calling it a framework. It connects solidarity economy practices and the people working in that world, right? Solidarity economy practices are aligned with these values that I already talked about. And you put this all together, right, to articulate a post-capitalist world. So solidarity economy is very clear about being post-capitalist. We absolutely believe we're not going to get there to that other world by reforming capitalism. And I'm not really going to go into like the reasons why, but that's a really clear position of solidarity economy. And it isn't to throw stones at people who believe that we can reform capitalism and get there. That's a position. People are welcome to their positions. I disagree, and solidarity economy disagrees, but we recognize, that's a position. We're not throwing stones. We're just saying this is what solidarity economy is. And we think it is really important, at least that clarity about whether you're shooting for reforming capitalism or you're looking to move beyond capitalism is very important. And impacts like what your choices are and what your outcomes will be. Solidarity economy is also a global movement. So I mentioned RIPES. Just some other indicators. The International Labor Organization offers an annual Solidarity Economy Academy. The United Nations has a task force on the solidarity economy. The solidarity economy is enshrined in the constitutions of Bolivia and Ecuador. And there are a number of countries that have national policy frameworks in support of solidarity economy. This is a not exhaustive list of examples of solidarity economy practices. So you can see that they exist in every sector of the economy, that there is a huge foundation to build on. I want to pull out a couple things. Solidarity economy absolutely embraces non-monetized, unpaid care work, as well as self-production like DIY work, mutual aid. So just because it's not being paid for doesn't mean that it's not highly valued in the solidarity economy. Another thing I want to point out too is under governance, and some of the anarchists might disagree with this, but for the most part, I think we recognize that the public sector is not going the state is not going anywhere anytime soon. And in the meantime, to the extent that we can recapture it as a vehicle to serve the common good, some of those aspects of the public sector are keepers, like public schools, some policies, national parks, things like that. So those are a couple things I wanted just to pull out. Again, just to make this point, there is a huge foundation already to build on that already exists. Many of these are very successful sectors, kinds of practices. Some are old, have been around as long as human beings have been around. Some are maybe newer innovations. Some are alternative, quote unquote, alternative, and some are mainstream, right? Very mainstream. So keep in mind all these practices, all these solidarity economy practices. And I want to give you a metaphor to think about them, which is a metaphor about imaginal cells. So when a caterpillar spins its chrysalis, its body starts to break down into this nutrient-rich goop. And in that goop are these things called imaginal cells. And those imaginal cells have a different vision of what it could be. It's so different, in fact, that what's left of the caterpillar's immune system starts attacking the imaginal cells and starts to kill them. But some of these imaginal cells, they recognize each other as part of the same visions, part of the same project, and they start to clump together. As they clump together, they're able to fend off the attacks of the immune system, and they survive. And then those little clumps clump together until they coalesce, they all come together and they start to specialize. So some of these imaginal cells become an eye, and some of them become a leg, and some of them become a wing, until it emerges from the chrysalis as a butterfly. So I love this as a metaphor for the solidarity economy. Think of all those solidarity economy practices. Right now, they're sort of like these imaginal cells. For the most part, they're existing in their own little worlds. They're existing in their own little silos. There's some clumping that's happening, but there's just not enough recognition of each other as being part of the same project to bring forth a whole new economic and social system. But that is what the solidarity economy is about, is trying to help to knit together and connect these imaginal cells. Because again, there is such a huge foundation to build on. We're not building it all afresh. Some new stuff has to be built for sure, but there is this huge foundation. I think that's it. So I will stop there.
Okay, thank you so much, Emily, for that insightful talk. Really appreciate the audience participation as well. Now we are moving on to the Q&A section of the program. So if you have any questions to ask Emily, please write them in the chat. We'll have a little over 10 minutes for our Q&A section. So the first question that came in is, can you give some examples of the most successful examples of solidarity economy initiatives you have seen?
So there's a lot of sectoral successes, right? And we're seeing this huge upswing in many different areas. So certainly the pandemic almost spontaneously spurred these mutual aid networks. I think that's reflected around the globe, certainly in the United States, sprung up out of nowhere. There's a huge upswing in interest in worker cooperatives and I would say so many of these practices are experiencing a huge uptick because people are looking. Sometimes people are driven, they're just driven to try to survive, at least speaking from the perspective of the United States, right? The people that are living in these underserved communities that are low income, that don't have a job, right? They're just trying to survive. And cooperation has always been the way that poor people and marginalized people have survived. So you see just a huge amount of experiments, a huge interest in community land trusts. So to what extent have they actually come together and built little local solidarity economies? There are efforts in the United States to do that, but it's very early days. It's very early days. So I would say that one example in the United States that's very intentional is Cooperation Jackson. So this is Jackson, Mississippi, a very historic part of the South and part of the Southern Black Belt, right, in terms of African American struggles, civil rights struggles, but also a very, really a struggling city, right? So there, Cooperation Jackson is part of a whole initiative that they call the Jackson Cush Plan. And so they're marrying building solidarity economy with an electoral strategy for local municipal control, and as well as the base building, the organizing in the community. And so in terms of the solidarity economy, they have a community land trust. They're developing permanently affordable housing. They are using the land that they've bought for farming. They are also very strategic about the land that they're purchasing. Many of them are important historically in terms of civil rights, as well as, unfortunately, some of the attacks and killings that have gone on. So they've been very strategic about that. They have a fab lab. So it's lots of cutting edge technology like 3D printers and other things that I don't even understand to start manufacturing their own stuff. They are in the process of purchasing a small strip mall so that they can open up, that has a closed down grocery store. So they'll open a food co-op there. So, and there's really a rich, there's a rich cultural component there in terms of Black liberation, Black struggle, Black identity. And, it isn't, it is all about sort of, in order to be free and self-sufficient, right? There's a deep political analysis. It's been decades and decades and decades in the making, this whole movement. So it's really early days. It's still really early days, um, but it's very interesting in that they're so comprehensive in their approach of marrying up the build with the electoral and the base building, organizing, just regular folk. Um, yeah. So it's an example. Some other places like Barcelona is quite advanced in really pulling all this stuff together. And some of the literature that I've seen, admittedly put out by the city, it just blows me away in terms of how comprehensive they are in their vision and trying to connect up all these different aspects, from culture to jobs to job training to like all social services. I mean, just amazing way in which it's all getting connected up. So there are, but I mean, there's no place, there's certainly no country that I would point to as saying, oh yeah, here's an example. It's still very fragmented everywhere.
Thank you. Our next question is the solidarity economy connected with the liberation theology movement?
Well, interesting. So one of the places where solidarity economy was strongest was Brazil, right? It is, given the political change there, this is not so true anymore. But once upon a time, right, solidarity economy, there was a ministry of solidarity economy in Brazil. And they for a while, right, for a number of years, maybe a decade, maybe a little longer, they were way ahead of any place else. There were solidarity economy forums in like all of the states of Brazil, like really drilling down into civil society, as well as engagement from the government and support. And so when they talk about the roots of solidarity economy in Brazil, certainly liberation theology was one of the three strands, along with like the MST, the landless workers movement. And the third one, I can't remember who the third one was. Anyway, they talk about these three strands. So, is it actually a member? It's not quite like that, right? Like, it's not clear who's a member. Like, some people are doing the work of solidarity economy. They're not necessarily using the term, but more and more what we're trying to do is get people to recognize we're all in this together. We're all heading in the same direction. Let's work together. Yeah.
Thank you. Our next question is, can you explain more about why reforming capitalism can actually strengthen capitalism?
Well, I mean, I do think the New Deal is a really good example, right? It was a time of incredible unrest coming out of the Great Depression. Really, people who were trying to overthrow capitalism, right? The socialist and communist parties, right? It was a time throughout the world where there really was hope that this was doable. It was a growing movement, right? Like, there was a great clarity about that the whole system of capitalism needed to be uprooted and replaced, right? By implementing, because it was so injurious, right? It was, so many people were suffering. And so the New Deal, what did it do? It gave people jobs. It gave people transfer payments. Or, it gave people unemployment. It implemented all these public works programs. People were able to be employed. It employed all these artists. It rebuilt bridges. It built parks. All the social welfare programs came in that time. There was support for housing. There were energy projects, right? Massive energy projects. I mean, there was support for co-ops, right? So electric co-ops in the United States that emerged out of New Deal policies, right? Supporting the formation of electric co-ops, because all these, some amazing percentage, it might have been like 80% of the rural population didn't have electricity. So that was part of New Deal. I mean, New Deal did a lot of good things. Absolutely, absolutely. But it did it to save capitalism, right? Um, after uh, after uh, an era of capitalism, a model of capitalism that was much more similar to what we see today, right? Where it's all about shrinking the state as much as possible, right? And cutting those social welfare programs and deregulation and corporate, just empowering corporations. So New Deal softened all of that, and through a lot of like genuinely good, I'm going to say bones, but really useful, worthwhile things to people. And yeah, people are like, okay, this system is delivering for me. Um, so I hope that's clear.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to combine some questions. So someone had asked, how much support in the US is there for solidarity economy? And I'll extend that question globally if you can think about that. Um, and specifically, someone also was mentioning South America and how there's a lot more support for it versus the
Mhm,
US. What's
mhm.
your take on that?
Yeah, so Latin America totally was way ahead of the United States. Absolutely. I am not really sure where things are with shifting political realities in Latin America. I know Brazil, right there has been a lot of backing off of support for solidarity economy. Um, so in the United States, the US Solidarity Economy Network was formed in 2007. And so at that time, the term was practically completely unknown. So since then, from I would say among progressives, uh, by and large, people know the term. They don't necessarily understand it, but they've heard the term. Um, and increasingly, it's actually moving somewhat into the mainstream. One indication is um, just one small indication. The grant makers in the arts, which is a network of grant makers, including some big ones. I believe like Ford and MacArthur. Like anyway, those that size of foundations are part of this network, and they commissioned a report on solidarity economy and the arts and culture. So they're wanting to understand what is solidarity economy and how can foundations support this. Um, yeah, more and more we're being asked into circles. Solidarity economy is being asked into circles that yeah, that are opening up. I think in Europe, my sense is that, well, I'd say a couple things. It's stronger in some ways, although in Europe, a lot of the manifestation of solidarity economy is actually social economy. And there's some conflation between the two. And I think it's important to say that these are not the same things. I would say solidarity economy actually includes social economy, but social economy is narrower. So the traditional definition of social economy would be the CMAF, so cooperatives, mutuals, associations, and foundations. So these are all institutions. Solidarity economy is so much more than that, so much more, right? Mutual aid, it includes we embrace like culture is really an important component of solidarity economy. How we treat each other is really important. So way beyond co-ops and mutuals, right? Way beyond. So that's an important distinction. The other super important distinction is solidarity economy clearly embraces a post-capitalist vision. Social economy does not. Some people within a social economy who work in that field, they see social economy as a stepping stone towards something that's post-capitalist. But other people see it as a way to shore up capitalism. They see like there are these failings of capitalism. Oh, people are being left out who are struggling with some kind of a disability. So here's how we solve it. We use social enterprises to provide employment for those people. That's the way in which reforms strengthen capitalism. So social economy is kind of it's ambivalent about what system change you're talking about. Solidarity economy is not.
Thank you for that important clarification. Our final question for the Q&A is, do you think that solidarity economy will be opposed if it really grows and becomes a threat to the system? What would you say are the challenges facing solidarity economy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wish we were there in some ways. No, but I think that's absolutely right. I think we'll get stomped on if we become powerful enough and big enough to really pose a threat. I think absolutely. Do I have an answer to that? I do not. I do think it's something to grapple with. Right now, we fly. I'm not sure it's under the radar, but it's just like, so my day job is developing co-ops, worker co-ops in a city that is not particularly progressive. When we started shopping around to the anchor institutions like the hospitals and colleges, this idea of building worker-owned businesses, we got no pushback whatsoever, none whatsoever. Are you talking about job creation? That's great. That's just great, right? There's no pushback. So like sort of practice by practice, there's really no pushback. Like mutual aid sounds great. Community land trust sounds great. I never lead with, yeah, I never go around waving any kind of an anti-capitalist flag. I mean, that's what I believe, but still we can all be on the same page in terms of, it can be as, in our context, right? It can be as American as apple pie to talk about, yeah, all the workers should own it together. Like that feels quite consistent with American values, right? Let's do it together. But yeah, it's so, there's a lot we can do right now without, it's not only that there's no opposition, it's open arms. And then the other thing is, it's always surprising the allies you find, right? Even in kind of staid institutions, hospitals and colleges and these kind of things, you find people, in their youth, they were hippies, right? And so they're far away from it now in their suits and ties, but it resonates in some ways, right? So there's that. But yeah, it is true, right? If it became really serious, we would have to be prepared for that stomp down. We are not. We are not. I don't think, to my knowledge, I don't know any place in the world where they're really prepared for that. I will tell you that places like Cooperation Jackson that have had the boot come down, so throughout history, they talk about it a lot. They talk about it a lot, that we have to be prepared. So yeah, it's serious, it's real. We do have to think about that. I'm not in a good position to give any answers about it, but I recognize it's real. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. That wraps up our Q&A with Emily Kawano. Thank you again to everyone who submitted a question, and thank you, Emily, for being with us here today.